Thank you, Jane. That was wonderful. Should have asked you to do this right from the start. Okay. Uh, Welcome, everybody. I see that people are still filtering in, so we're going to take our time with our intro. Thank you for joining us. My name is Vince, and I'm the founder and CEO of Press Start Academy, and you are here for the Future Skills Roundtable. Just a little quick introduction on what this series is. As you can see here, we have a list of dates. This has been a series that started from the beginning of October, and we're running through mid-December. It's a series of 6 webinars. If you're a little bit confused as to why maybe the dates are a little bit changed, that's because we had a little bit of a reschedule that we had to do because our previous session 4 had to be moved due to speaker schedules. So here we are, and we are here for session 4, the new session 4 on creativity. This is a little bit more specific towards this entire series focuses on what we call the 21st century skills. So 21st century skills span 6 C's, creativity being one of them. The rest of the 5 are communication, critical thinking, collaboration, citizenship, and character. So part of our mission at Press Start Academy is to revolutionize how 21st century skills are being developed as well as being assessed. And so we're trying to do what the United Nations has done with the Sustainable Development Goals, in that we are categorizing the 21st century skills into targets and indicators, and trying to build a shared vocabulary on how they can be tracked and assessed. How we deliver them is through play and games. And so we build a lot of adventure stories, we build a lot of game-based experiences, and so on and so forth. And as we are trying to bring future skills and 21st century skills into the mainstream, into public awareness, into schools, educators, parents, that's why we are convening this session. So it is a series of 6 different sessions and webinars, each focusing on one of the 21st century skills. So the focus and the reason that we're here today is creativity. I don't think creativity needs that much of an introduction. I think everybody is pretty aware of what it is and its importance. Just to help set the stage a little bit, I do want to quote something which is actually quite useful, hopefully quite interesting. According to the World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs report published in 2020, creativity, originality, and initiative is one of the top 10 skills of 2025. So that's a little bit of a reference stat or reference figure for you. Today I'm very excited to be hosting 3 very inspiring friends, people I have the honor to call friends. So I will introduce them one by one. I'll go through their bios and bring them on screen. First is the person who was behind our wonderfully mesmerizing wait music. Jing, if you can turn on your camera and say hi. There we go. Nice. Jing is an award-winning singer-songwriter and theater maker. You might have seen him perform around town before. He is still super active, so please follow him on Instagram at JingWhaleMusician. So Jing graduated with a degree in theater design from Central St. Martin's College of Art and Design. He also has a master's in theater directing from London Central School of Speech and Drama. And maybe you didn't know, maybe you did, he's currently pursuing a PhD at the City University of Hong Kong on immersive interactive storytelling, on top of all of the touring and recording and performing that he is doing around town. So it is a great honor to have you with us, Jing. I'm super excited to learn more about your creative process. Thank you for joining us. All right, next up is Sarah. Sarah, please feel free to turn on your camera as well and say hi. All right, Sarah is an architect. Actually, she's a really wonderful and talented architect. She is a co-founder of Hong Kong-based One Byte Design Studio. And you will definitely have seen a lot of the work around town, from Kowloon Bay's Kaya Play Space to Tuen Mun's Siu Hei Court, as well as, I don't know if anybody has paid attention or probably is a regular user of the Lokjoy Khoi green sort of recycling facilities in all of the districts. Sarah's team is actually behind all of those. So it's really a wonderful pleasure to have you with us, Sarah. Thank you for joining us. And please also follow all of the Instagram things at One Bite and at Guts and all of those things. We will share all of those. And if you haven't followed us on Instagram yet, please do. In all of our promotional posts, you will get all the links to Sarah's accounts and all of her handles. So thank you, Sarah, for taking the time. Last but not least, we have Michael. Michael, feel free to turn on your camera as well and say hi. Like, love the lightsaber.
Hi, everyone.
Love the lightsaber in the background. Michael, I've actually known for quite a while. We overlapped quite briefly at IBM. And so Michael is actually a global design director at IBM iX Interactive Experience, which is the experience design consulting arm. And he actually operates on a global scale with global projects, working with global clients, and so on. If you've seen and heard of Michael Tam, that might be because he is a really active speaker. He is super passionate about giving back to the design community. He's also running the UX Design Bootcamp at Happier, and just loves spreading his passion and talent across town and across the world. So it is also an honor to have you with us, Michael. Thank you for joining us. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we're going to dive right in. I see that people are still coming in. Welcome. And I guess welcome, to all the future people who will be joining us too. So a quick word on today's flow. We do have a couple of questions drafted on creativity. The point is to bring in multidisciplinary folks and really talented creatives from across different disciplines. So we have people from music, from the creative arts, to architecture and placemaking, to also design strategy on an enterprise level. It's really interesting to have the opportunity to pick their brains on their creative processes. I think I am hypothesizing that there are some common threads that we can weave throughout. So let's try to see if that hypothesis will hold up. So I have a couple of questions drafted on creativity. Try to learn from these guys' processes. And we'll have time throughout or at the end to take some questions from the audience. So as we go along, please feel free to drop in comments or ideas or questions in the Zoom chat and or the Q&A box. And we'll see if it's relevant, then we'll sprinkle them in. For the time being, let's dive right in because we have limited time. So I want to start off, Jing, Sarah, and Michael, with a very basic question. What do you like most about what you do? Jing, I'm going to start with you. What do you like most about what you do?
I like that my work is play. And playing is working. So I enjoy every minute of it.
Love that. That's super succinct and super to the point. Love that. All right, Sarah, over to you. What do you like most about what you do?
I like working on things that can make every day better. So yeah, so I do enjoy what I've been doing every day.
Wow. Okay, Michael.
All right. Well, as you know, I work for IBM, so a lot of my clients are very traditional enterprises, which have very complicated, multi-layered sort of business challenges, human problems, process problems. So I realized after working in IBM for 5-6 years now, I really like solving complex problems. And I think a lot of the time, the outcome, echoing what Sarah was saying, it really deliver impact, making the world better in ways that we never imagined. And I also really love what Jin was saying. It's not work at all. It's a lifestyle. It's design, creativity is a lifestyle. It's what you breathe and live every single day. So that's what get me going.
So I was telling these guys in the sort of tech check session that we are going to be compiling like sound bites and quotes from everybody. I feel like the opening statement from everybody is already so critical. That's so cool. All right, so I'm gonna drill down a little bit more because we are going to dive into the nitty-gritty aspects of creativity. But before we do that, I want to follow up on the first question and ask, why do you create? What drives you? And what gives you purpose? Michael, I'm going to start with you this time.
It's such a philosophical question.
Yeah, it is.
What drives us? I guess, well, as I mentioned, solving complex problem is actually very exciting. Sometimes it's draining, but that while it's draining a lot of energy out of you, but it actually gives you all those dopamine in your mind, in your heart, in your body that really gets you going. And I think that's what really drives me. And that's what I love. I guess at this moment, I'm still on a consulting side. You can look at it like in an agency, you work on a lot of different clients. And that's what's get me going, get me very excited about every day, because every client has very, very different challenges, and there's no one set of answer to what we need to do every day. No one set of solutions. So that means every day is very different, and that's what creativity is all about. And that's why creativity is so important.
So for you, I guess what drives you is just every single day you're solving different problems and the variation and the flexibility there.
Exactly. Yeah.
Great.
Or else I get bored.
Yeah, for sure. Sarah, what about you? Do you get bored? What drives you?
Yeah, I cannot do repeating work because I would get bored very easily. And I feel that on the other hand, what drives me doing what I'm doing now is really out of curiosity. Yeah, because I really enjoyed, especially when I'm working with I say public space and community design. So I do have all the chances that maybe today I was talking to an elderly, but then yesterday I was actually having a workshop with kids, and maybe the other day I'm actually meeting and chatting with families. So it actually helped me to feed my curiosity, to know them more, to see what they actually need. And so creativity helps me to bridge their needs to maybe a solutions or some new ideas. So I think that makes that the balance between curiosity and creativity keeps pushing me forward.
I love that. I feel like my hypothesis is already halfway being realized right now. Jing, what about you? What drives you? What gives you purpose?
I guess I have two answers to that. The first one, it's because I'm a very emotional person. So when I have so much emotions inside of me, I need an outlet. And the outlet is creating things, whatever it is. It could be a song, it could be a theater piece, it could be like a season of clothes collection. It could be like all the things that I've been doing so far. So that's a reason for creating things, anything. And the second answer to that is I'm trying very hard to avoid doing real work in the traditional sense. So whatever I'm doing, I need to make it into my career so that I don't have to work.
Mm-hmm.
So creativity for you is just a way to run away from your problems, Jing. Is that what it is?
Exactly.
There we go. Okay, I love that. So I want to start going into the maybe not so sexy side of creativity, because we have been operating on the differences, the flexibility, the variations that drive us every single day, right? And that is really fun. But maybe actually I would love to know if this aspect is also fun for you, which is the execution bit, right? So there is a huge difference and a huge transition between the idea generation side and the idea execution side, right? So we are working, like Michael works a lot in strategy, obviously Sarah does as well, and Jing has a lot of crazy ideas in his head, right? So it's a lot of these things that are kind of floating around, but then getting them down on paper and then being able to execute on them, right? In Sarah's case, it's actually the act of building those things out. These are very different parts of your brain that you use. These are very different modes of thinking and operation. And I'm just curious to see like how you reconcile these, right? How do you like manage that transition from the idea generation to the idea execution? Is there one part that you prefer a little bit more on? And what does that process look like for you? Sarah, I'll start with you first.
Perhaps I'm not that creative, because when you compare idea generation, idea execution, I'm a very action-driven person. So I love idea execution, but perhaps because of my background or of my profession, whenever I have an idea, I can just grab a paper and I will draw. So I don't allow ideas to stay in my brain, but I always want to draw it out so that we can test. Because if we don't test it, and then we never know whether it's the best idea. So yeah, I feel that struggle now. But yeah, but I think idea execution for me is quite important, or as important as idea generation.
Is there like either one that you enjoy more of, or do you see them as like kind of two sides of the same coin, or how do you kind of, especially when you work with your team as well, because you have a pretty big team in terms of like people who are creatives, people who are going to be more focused on the operational side. Like, who do you like to work with more? Which side of that business?
I would prefer the idea generation, because I know, especially in the team, I know my role in the team. So I know who is the person that I have to work closer with, and who are those that could actually bring the ideas to the very best ending. And I think that's how the team works right now. Yeah, but I feel that it's really based on my mood. Like maybe this week I don't want to think about ideas, and then I will go to the idea execution. On the other hand, I feel so bored, and then I will start like brainstorming all the random thoughts in my mind.
I guess that's part of the flexibility that you can have. I'm going to turn to Jing, because I don't know if I'm right in my assumption, but I feel like Jing likes a lot of the idea generation bit. So walk us through that process of like, how do you go from like all the crazy ideas that you have, and we have spent hours talking about the crazy ideas that you have in your head, into like, how do you prioritize which to execute, how do you execute, and what part of that process, if any, do you enjoy?
I actually enjoy both sides, but obviously the idea generating part is what I'm better at. I'm good at that. So of course I enjoy that more, but the satisfaction does not come if you don't execute it. So that's why I like seeing a product or a song or a show being produced, because you only really get to feel satisfaction when the product or whatever it is reaches the consumer, you might say, and seeing their reaction to it. So I like the execution because I want the reward after the game. You want the victory points. So I like both in that sense. But because I'm not so good at certain parts of execution, like technicalities. So I will choose people to work with as a team. For example, I've been writing these proposals to get funding from the government to create music theater projects recently in the past several years. And I'm really good at writing something catchy, something interesting enough that the government thought, okay, I'll give him money. But I'm really not so good at doing the budgeting. So I would find a partner who is good at doing budgeting. And through discussions and conversations, my partner will help me write up these complicated like numbers. And oh, great. So that's how it works for me.
Cool. I think that entirely is consistent with like the Jing Wong and like his creative process that I know of. Now, Michael, what about you? I think that it seems to me that you operate kind of somewhere in between, right? Because you are not only generating your own ideas, but you're helping enterprises do that as well, right? So there's a lot of strategizing that you're doing on behalf of clients because that's kind of like a huge part of what you do. So how do you kind of prioritize the idea generation bit and the idea execution bit in your day-to-day work?
Well, to me, it is the same thing. Execution and ideation is intertwined. I think your question raised a really good, really interesting question that we might be able to dive into later on, is what exactly is creativity and how do you define it? Because I think that is where a lot of the time the education system has an issue with creativity, is that you equal creativity as output. All right. So if you think about like what Sarah does, like architecture, she come up with all the plans, all the ideas, but she's not necessarily the one who's actually building the building, right? So do you define her not as executing it, right? And even though Jin is doing all the different things and partners doing the budgeting, but does it mean he's not executing his creativity? I think that is where the biggest issue is these things cannot be separated. Like Jin was saying, if you have an idea and if you don't execute it, it's worthless. So I think that is a lot of the misconception with creativity. And myself, I came from a advertising background. I was a creative in the ad industry before I moved into UX design and strategic design. And a lot of the time when I see in the ad agencies world is that, especially in the old days, when it was in the good days when there were a lot of budget, there were a lot, well, still are, there are a type of creatives who just come up with ideas that's just for awards. That's not going to be executed. It's not going to deliver business value. And now that's not going to work, not especially not in a recession. And the fact that we are in an era of makers, people come up with an idea, they go pitch for funding, they got to execute it. But why are people giving funding to these startups, to these founders? Not necessarily just because of an idea, but it's also because of their ability to execute. So I think these two things really go hands in hand, and that's my day-to-day work. It goes hand in hand. You can't separate the two, which is why I love the fact that we now look at, no matter it's a digital product or any sort of creation, you take a MVP approach, minimum viable product approach, right? You do make small, test it, you execute it as quick as you could, and then you change it, iterate it again. And that's how you combine creativity and execution. So no separation for me. In short,
MVP.
sorry, I went a long way, but yeah,
I like
MVP.
that term. I've never heard of it. I mean, I thought it's most valuable
because
player,
you always get an MVP award, right? Like the most valuable player.
Yeah,
on
exactly.
on the pitch or on the court, right? Or on in a band. But MVP, minimum viable product.
Nice. I love that. I mean, I think it's really interesting that, Michael, you just posed like your own question to the panel.
Well,
and speaking of which,
question, we build on top of it.
Speaking of which, there are questions coming in the Q&A. I think there's one. We'll address that later. So if you're inspired by what these folks are talking about, please drop some questions in. Well, since Michael asked the question, I feel like it only makes sense for us to address that. And in fact, I'm going to ask you first, Michael, to answer your own question. Because I do think that it's quite useful to put this into perspective, right? We did start this session kind of assuming that there is a common aligned understanding on creativity, right? That's why we jumped directly into, what drives you and all the nitty gritty, like process-oriented things first. But it does help to put things into perspective and take a step back and understand like where everybody is coming from. So Michael, what is creativity to you?
I think creativity is looking at something from a new angle, as simple as that. Looking at something from a new angle. It could be combination of a different point of view. It could be a combination of a few different solutions. It could just basically turn things upside down. There's no bigger or less creativity in how you look at things. There's big or small, doesn't matter. Is as long as you look at something from a completely new angle, that's creativity for me.
I feel like Michael just asked this question just so that he can use the opportunity to put this into quotes.
Come on.
Okay, I'm just kidding, man. Jing, what about you? What is creativity to you?
Michael's definition is really good. I think the answer I have in mind are on similar lines, but I have a slightly different angle. I kind of see everything as games. I think human beings loves creating rules. Everything is regulated by rules. The society, there are laws, like how you cross the road. Like there are these rules, and like board games, obviously, like how you win. But even in life, there are several ways to win. In a sense, in financial terms or whatever. I mean, there are certain ways to win. So I think first, creativity is about learning the rules. Secondly, is about mastering the rules. And then it comes when we know how to break them. And creativity is when we know how to break the rules, and that's creativity.
Love that.
Another one for the posters. All right, Sarah, what about you? What is creativity to you?
I think their answers, when you combine it, and that's the perfect answer. Yeah, because I truly agree that a lot of times we talked about seeing things from a different angle, but unless you truly understand what's inside or in that matter, you cannot think from another angle. Yeah, so I think combining what Michael and Jane said, that's the perfect answer.
I reckon it would be quite interesting. Some people might look at what Sarah just said and think of, all right, I think it's funny enough that Vincent, you actually written it, you know, what Michael and Jin said. You know, some people might look at it, hey, that's not very creative. You know, it's just combining two things. But the fact is, combining two things is creativity. And Jin was saying he has a slightly different point of view, slightly different angle on what I said, and that is creativity. And there's really no big or small or anyway. That is creativity. And I just love the fact that we all sort of look at it, chip in from a very different ways.
Yeah, that's when I think about ideas. I always love to use alternative worlds, because when you can put two things, even random things together and find a language, it's already give you new ideas. Yeah, exactly what Michael has just said.
I mean, the idea or just the fact that creativity is an iterative process, right? I mean, as what everybody is saying, it's you're throwing an idea out and see what works, and you're getting feedback just to test things out, right? And then you kind of build on that, right? I mean, it's really hard to have like a truly original idea at this point in time. So a lot of it is what Michael, you and Sarah, you're saying is we're taking things and combining them together. And this actually leads really well to my next drafted question, because I think Jing was also talking a little bit about this already, is the learning and the breaking of the rules, right? I want to really dive into the role and the purpose of having those rules first. Just to give a little background, and also I think this leads really nicely and bridges the gap to some of the other 21st century skills as well. And this is something that I've found in all of our sessions up to now, is none of the 21st century skills exist in isolation, right? In our first session on character, there was a lot of talk on communication, because you're talking about leadership and how do leaders communicate with the people that they work with, and everybody in their ecosystem, right? In our second session on communication, we heard a lot about creativity as well, and then in the third session on critical thinking, we had a lot of other things that kind of came into play, right? Obviously there's creativity, there's obviously communication as well, but there's also collaboration too. So when we talk about creativity, I feel like a lot of times people kind of see that as at odds with critical thinking or with the idea of structure, right? Oh, by definition, creativity has to be free flow. It has to be flexible. You're free to do whatever you want. But as Jing was saying just now, that you have to learn the rules first. I mean, he's a musician. I play some music. And the idea is that in order to create things that are recognizable, you got to understand like the theory that goes on behind in the first place in order to create something new, right? That kind of follows, past traditions and follows precedents, right? So I want to ask you about that process for you, right? I'm super keen to learn more about your creative process, right? Are you learning the rules first? Are you understanding what is possible first? Or are you looking at something that I really want to explore and then working backwards to see what is feasible and what is possible, right? Does the form come first before the function? What is the prioritization for you, and how do you kind of work on your process to create new things? Ding, I'm going to throw this at you first because honestly, just from a selfish perspective, I just want to know how you create your songs. So do you have like a equation or a formula that you follow?
Not at the beginning. I think it was for my first 2 albums, I basically just followed my instinct, because I have listened to like so many songs that I love, like the 60s, a lot of Beatles influence, a lot of folk blues. But eventually, I discovered that some of my songs sound quite similar, and I'm not happy with that. I thought, I've got these habits on my playing. So I want to break away from these similarities. So I need to break away from it. I need to know what I'm doing. So I started learning more about like chord theories, and I tried to analyze some songs that I love, like Britpop bands like Radiohead or whatever, or Beatles songs, obviously. The chord changes, like why was there this chord change? And why does this sound weird but cool? Somehow it works. I mean, normally these 2 chords don't work together, but why did it work? So I need to understand the theories. That's why I spent some time like buying several theory books, because I wasn't trained as a musician. I just played the guitar because I love the sound of it. I love doing it. It looks cool. It sounds cool. But I wasn't classically trained. So I went to read a lot of these theory books, and eventually I understood the mechanics, like game mechanics behind it, the design behind it. So, okay, now I know that C, A minor, E minor, D minor, F, G, and B diminished. These are the chords that would work together that will always sound good. Like almost no matter like how you put it, which in front of which, it almost always sound good. So this is the basic formula. So you just have to change the key, but the pattern is the same. But then the challenge comes. Since more than half of the pop songs in the world are made up of these chords, the same structure, why do they sound different? So that's where your personal identity comes in. How can you sound different within this kind of formula? Or how can you break this formula enough, but somehow still have that kind of pop quality? Like pop as meaning in a sense, it's catchy, people can remember it, and people can hum the melody afterwards as a song they like and love. That's the hard part. I don't know if this answers the question, but that's kind of how I approach songwriting. And sometimes to break away from repeating myself, I decide to switch instruments. For example, I always embrace my guitar at night, and then I play something. It sounds good. It sounds similar. Okay, let me just play the piano. I'm not good. I don't really know how to play the piano, but I know the chords. so I can play something that sounds good. But because it's unfamiliar to me, I approach it as something completely new and refreshed. And I just put my fingers in certain patterns. Ooh, this chord is funky. Okay. So the notes are, okay, 1, 4, 7, and 11. Okay, and I can count. And then I'll find the notes in my guitar and then try to play it. And then, oh, I never found this chord shape before. But because of jumping outside to objectify what I'm doing, I see it from a third perspective. And then I find something new. And if piano doesn't work, I can try ukulele or ukulele is too similar, but still it's different. Or banjo or the harmonica, because the harmonica, like some of the notes don't exist, so it's always in a certain scale. It gives a different kind of restriction. So I kind of love different sets of restriction, but when you shift from one type of restriction to a different type of restriction, it's another kind of freedom, if it makes sense.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense. This is super interesting. And I want to turn to Sarah next, because we're changing from like musical performance, which is a lot of like, it sounds, but does the same concepts apply to, oh, hi, Kat. Do the same concepts apply to the built environment? Because you are constrained by engineering principles, you are constrained by actual physics, right? So how do you arrive at like testing new ideas and coming up with new things? What are like, how do you work within those constraints, and how do you get new perspectives like Jing was talking about?
I guess a lot of people are thinking, okay, if you need to build a building, so you have to follow all the rules, all the physics. But I feel that after being in this industry for some time, and I think if you can work with the good people or some people who's willing to make a change, and then everyone, even technology has been improving a lot. So there's actually no absolute no or absolute yes to any ideas. I think that's how I try to keep myself more optimistic. But on the other hand, I really enjoy what Jean has shared, because in a way, even when I'm working on different types of design, honestly, I don't know all the details when I started. Yeah, because okay, maybe one day you're designing a school, on the other day you're designing a public space, maybe on third day I'm designing a playground. So all the technical skills are very different. So that's why when I start a project or start to think about an idea, I spend quite a lot of time to understand what's behind, even looking at the most boring playground to understand why it's boring, to, why some countries have this type of public space while we don't have in Hong Kong. So I start to generate different questions to build up, I would say, the why we are doing this. I feel that the embedded knowledge was not the first priority for myself, but the why we are doing something and the what changes we want to see. I think helps me to push or give me all the substance to learn throughout the process. Yeah, so I would say I don't really have a formula, but I would say I would try to learn maybe to 80% of that matter. And then I will allow that 20% of being wild thought, so that you can have this, so can we do this? And can we do that? Why? And why can't we do this? And what if we try something like that? So we actually give ourselves that room to imagine something. I think that helps to keep creativity alive. Yeah, because you always want to challenge the original assumption, or you always want to learn some insights from maybe even the people around you. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. I think it's super interesting. And obviously, I know a lot of the work that you're doing is not just limited to like the built environment only, right? Because like the idea of placemaking is what is like the intention or the why a place exists. So I feel like I want to, like, before we turn to Michael, I want to also ask you a little bit about like, maybe is there a difference between like, doing the architect side of your work versus the placemaking side of your work? And does that necessarily maybe give you more options and more flexibility to brainstorm more things? Or am I completely wrong and you're like, oh, these are like, you know, very similar things? I just want to learn a little bit more about how you kind of see these two disciplines.
I would see them kind of being in the same family, yeah, but they may be brothers, because I'm sorry about my cat, yeah, and because in a way, if I don't, firstly, I don't think creativity is only for designers. But on the other hand, being a designer is a lot of time, I'm not, maybe even for different creative, we always feel that we have to be creative when we work things out. And so even we face a lot of harsh times where we think, okay, let's do this. Well, it's going to make the prettiest staircase and the prettiest playground. And then someone come in and tell you, actually, we only need a program, perhaps. We don't really need those hardwares. Do you think that's necessary? Yeah, so I think there's a lot of back and forth challenges and how we actually balance our ego or eagerness to design while to find the most appropriate and suitable things for maybe for the space or even for placemaking, which is for the community. Yeah, I quite enjoy the struggles in a way, but yeah, but every time we learn something different.
Love that. Thank you, Sarah. And you've just given me the perfect prompt to pass to Michael, because I know that he has a lot to say in response to what you said just now. Creativity is not just limited to designers. So love to get your perspective, Michael.
Okay. Well, I do love a lot of what Sarah just said, and Jin as well. I think so much that I actually forgot what I wanted to say. But I do think, even though the three of us work in seemingly different industry, but I think there's a lot of similarity in terms of how we approach creativity, how we approach problem solving, how we approach creation, execution. I think we actually, I think all of us know one thing is that we need to put in the hard work, the groundwork, which is to whether you study the law, study the rules, study the data behind, questioning and brief, understanding truly what is the problem that you're solving, so you have a true idea of the intention, the why of what you are trying to do before you move on to start creating, coming up with ideas. But I also noticed that one thing that we also do very similarly is we don't, again, go back to some of the earlier question, is we don't define creativity as this is creativity and then this is execution. It's never that straightforward. It's always like, all right, we do the groundwork, study the information, the data, the law, the rules, and then we do a bit of creativity, and then we go back a little bit and think again, or maybe we even switch briefs a little bit to find inspiration, and then we keep testing. So again, we're doing all this creation, our creative processes in little chunks. So I think if I have to summarize that, what I'm trying to say is, I think someone said, you know, creativity is always about connecting the dots. And I think what we do is connecting the dots of understanding the problem, connecting the dots of ideas, connecting the dots of insights, connecting all these dots along the way, trying to find different combination of those dots so that we finally come up with an idea at the end. But I think it was Sarah who touched on it, is yes, we also need to have that openness to know that it's not necessary that is the final kind of piece of outcome, but you need to kind of articulate it and involve your stakeholder, your client, or whoever is involved in the project, so that they can add onto it to keep adding more dots, keep adding more connections. I think that is what true creativity is come from. But again, it's not an easy thing, because it takes a lot of that curiosity that I think Jin or Sarah touched on earlier. With that curiosity, it takes the hunger. you need to have the hunger for that. You gotta have that burning desire to keep trying the different combination of connecting the dots. I think sometimes that's what stopping people from truly being creative. They haven't put in that hard work. They see an idea and let it die when it was a baby. You got to keep growing it, right? So
I love the word hunger. I think
Mm.
that's super important. Yeah, because sometimes you feel so hungry that I have to do something today. Yeah.
Can I just say that this is like every bit as thought-provoking as I was hoping it would be. And I think it's really interesting because like the first two questions, I'm keeping time, right? So the first two questions, like we were done with them in like 5 minutes, and I'm like, oh damn, like what's going on? And then like this last question, we've been on this for like 25 minutes. So I think it's just really cool just to see this kind of like we're kind of organically developing, iterating on everybody's ideas too. And I think that's super interesting.
That is creativity in itself. We're connecting
exactly.
each other's dots and trying to come up with new combination, new questions and insights.
I love that. So we have 20 minutes left, and there are some questions that have been coming in. So before I get to my last question, I want to, get some questions in from the audience. Just now, Michael, you were talking about, and Sarah as well, you're talking about hunger. And connecting the dots through to execution. So I want to throw one of the questions that have been asked is, how do you stick with an idea? The idea of perseverance. So the question is, I find it very easy to generate new ideas, but have trouble carrying it out, especially if it requires months to execute. Any tips and advice on how to persevere? Michael, I'm going to start with you because I know that you persevere a lot with your clients too. So what is your tips and tricks?
As much as Sarah. Her project scope was probably longer.
Well, that's why we're starting with you first, Michael.
Okay. How to preserve with that hunger? I guess the first thing is okay. I find it very easy to generate new ideas and carry it out. I guess the hard thing, the thing I want to understand here is whether the person who posed that question, who need to understand is whether what is the reason behind she struggled to carry it out? Like, is it because she felt like the idea, maybe deep down subconsciously, she felt like the idea wasn't, maybe it was telling her it wasn't the right idea, she need to keep working on it, or maybe she just waiting for the idea to execute. All right, that's fine too. So but if it's waiting, is it really something that you can't add on to it, or is it you're just waiting after to execute it, and maybe you could jump onto another project, come up with another idea, or you could keep building on that idea? I think it goes back to your perception of an idea when it's done. If you think you come up with an idea and that's done, then it's sort of defeated the purpose of creativity itself or the idea itself, because you got to always look at an idea and look at it as you can improve on it, you can grow it. Even I'm sure if Jin came up with a song, finished writing it, send it to the producer, and then next second after you send it out, you realize, damn, there's something I can improve it. Maybe that work I can twist a little bit. You can come up with a different version, and then it doesn't mean you let go of the original idea. You just keep improving it. And I don't think there's any issue with that if you look at it from that perspective.
Sarah, what about you? What would your advice be?
I don't stick with my ideas. And I think what Michael said was really true, because perhaps I would see this from Michael has mentioned some angles. I will look at it from another angle. Is usually when I receive feedbacks on my idea, I will first think about, so have I missed anything? Is the idea really so good that everyone should accept that? And then on the other hand, I love the way when we can be creative, or we being the creatives, we always have to tell stories to people. But the magic of telling story is that everyone sees the story differently. So is your idea being pitched to someone not interested in the idea, or you're actually using the wrong tone and manner and even the wrong way of telling the story? I think that makes a huge difference of how people, the chance of how people may perceive your story, because your idea may not just fit that group of audience. So are you telling the right things to the right group of people? I think similar to music, I guess. Some people would love blues or jazz, but some like the other one, and you never can change them in a way. Yeah, so I think I will try to look at that differently. So, but I would be very perseverant to upholding the values of the idea. Yeah, I really enjoy that when someone tell me, no, this is not a good idea. And then on the other day, we come up with something totally different, but then that fit the purpose and become the right thing. I quite enjoy that. It will be part of this gaming habit or the charm of in a game.
Well,
I think
I
Sarah
mean,
touched on
oh,
the
sorry, go ahead.
intention. So I just want to add on that really good point Sarah made. She touched on the intention of the idea or the execution of the idea, right? That's two very different things. If you're not clear about the intention, if you're not clear about the rationale, so you can't sell it. So you don't even believe in it. That's why you didn't preserve it. If you're clear, then all the execution things it's just part of the process.
Well, I was going to say, Sarah was just kind of helping me do my job and bringing Jing and music into the equation. So I have to turn to you now, Jing.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Sarah and Michael. I mean, it's exactly that. I mean, if you know the reason why you're doing that work, the intention, the rationale behind it, because there are hundreds and millions of ideas, different ways to execute the intention. So whenever you're stuck or lost, just go back to the intention, the rationale behind why you're doing it, or what are you doing? I mean, if you are very clear on the direction of the project, then it just comes eventually. You just try different approaches to that. Then an idea is not something like superfluous, like not something. It's not like, oh, this sounds cool, it's fun, let's just do it. I mean, sometimes that happens, sometimes, but if you want something to be in line, you need the motivation behind it, the reason. So that will give your work substance. Otherwise, it's just something fancy, something cool, and fancy things might be cool for a while, but they won't stick around. They won't last. Anything that has like, well, I shouldn't, maybe, I don't know if I should say this, but anything that has value, I think, and stays, is there because it has weight. It has a reason to be there. I guess
there's so many quotable like nuggets that I don't like. I just feel bad for my team. They have to like compile so many like quotation quotes. That's super cool. And I'll just add that like Xiu Hui, like you are getting like advice from like the top 3 of the top creative minds in Hong Kong. So this is just super awesome. So I'm actually happy for you that you have like you're asking all these questions. All right, great. Let's go to another question. Because I feel like this might be also like the flip side of the execution of an idea, which is, have you, and I'm sure the answer is yes, experience thinking about an idea and then when you execute it, you realize it's not feasible. So what is your process of working through that disappointment? I feel like I will anticipate you guys saying that it's not really a disappointment because it's kind of pushing it forward. But I want to understand like how, like maybe a little bit of how you came to develop that understanding and that perspective of being able to treat failure as part of creativity. So I'm going to twist the question a little bit and ask you about your process in developing that kind of perspective. Let's see, Jing, I'm going to start with you this time.
Okay. I think there's a lot more logic involved in creativity than people are intended to imagine, because people just think, oh, creativity is something you just grab in the air oh, I have this idea, let's do it. And personally, I think sometimes it happens, but most of the time, like a songwriter, well, there's a term called songsmith, and songsmith is someone who can keep on churning out songs, even on a really tight deadline. I mean, if I have to write a song in 10 minutes, I can. 5 minutes even, I can, or even improvise. I mean, if needed. It might not be the best song, but I can come up with something because I've got formulas. But if you want to write a very good song, something that breaks the mold, then it requires more thought. And where does that come from? It's then that goes back to what we were talking earlier. Like, we need to know the logic behind how something works. And once you know the logic behind, you can break the logic. And that's when a more interesting creative product comes out. Is that the question? Wait, what's the question again?
Well, the question was basically how you came to, develop the understanding that failure or iterations is part of the process. So
right.
Absolutely, you did answer the question because you are talking about, the iterative process.
Yes. So because of that, whatever you tried, if it failed, it's not a failure because it's the process of refining your product, be it a song or a dress or a show or performance, whatever it is, or an architecture. It's just, okay, step one, I tried this didn't work. Okay, so step two, let me try this different approach. But you have to know, obviously, why you're using the different approaches you're using. It's because, okay, this didn't work in A, so let me try B. It's a natural extension of whatever. I mean, then it makes sense. Yeah.
Sarah and Michael, do you guys have anything to add to that?
I feel that when you actually have failures every day, you may still have that disappointment, but you could add a bit of humor in it. So there's like, oops, so this doesn't work. Okay, so let's move on. I'll try to take it quite easy, especially when iteration is part of the process. I think myself at least, I get used to how ideas fails and then we learn from it and goes on. Yeah, that's one example I'd like to share a little bit is during COVID, I think I've been thinking about a lot of ways to maybe to contribute. And then there's the day that I think everyone will remember when we could not eat in restaurants. So a lot of street workers, a lot of just normal workers, they have to sit on the street to have their lunch. And we say, hey, no way, what's happened to our city? So even our park, our public space, there is no one who could stay there. And then we suddenly, we actually, the whole team, not whole team, but like 5 of us sit down and say, okay, let's brainstorm something. So we came up with a lot of ideas and eventually we think, okay, tram. Why don't we ask tram if they can actually drive around so people can go up to it? Because at that point, the government didn't say we could not eat on public transport. So we actually just
know the rules and you twist it. Nice.
Yes. And then at the same time, like just in the same afternoon, we call tramways and say, hey, do you think we're happy to sponsor this thing or do something together for community? And they were so happy, like, oh yeah, we should do something and think about that. But then after half an hour, they call back and say, oh, our party tram was under the party license, so we could not hold anything for you. So it's actually like a very steep mountain for a day. But in a way, and then we learned that party tram is under the party license. And you know what are the constraints. And so you will start to think about something else. So I would say like, disappointment was there because you put the effort to think about and develop an idea, but you actually learn more from the failures than if you had actually made it happen. Yeah, I quite like this story because I was pretty sad on that day. Yeah, but I think it's okay. Yeah.
I mean, that's a great story. Yeah. Well, go ahead, Michael. Sorry.
It's interesting, even Sarah, someone who practiced design thinking, doing a lot of creativity, felt the disappointment of that because you and your team, supposed to be already very, used to not treating every idea as the final state, right? But I think it also comes from the emotional part that you felt you really want to make an impact. And I think a lot of the time for designers, because we are all designers or creatives, we are all deep down, we're emotional beings, and we really want to do something about the world. And when you come up with an idea, you felt like, all right, this is going to change the world. This is the one. And I think it's great to have that passion, but you got to channel that passion slightly, channel that passion to allow you to come up with more ideas rather than having that passion just being rooted in just one idea. I think it's nothing wrong, but it's just not the most efficient, effective way of channeling your passion. So I think it's the starting point. If you got to know your idea, your one idea, your 10 idea or 50 ideas is not the final state, then you will not looking at it from a negative way, but positive way, but it's just a little bit more healthier. If you think of it, you can continuously grow that idea. I think that's how you should do it. But I think the hardest thing for a designer or creative to do is not just to deal with whether the idea is feasible or not. Because when we practice design thinking, when we're in a workshop, when we come up with ideas, we actually have an exercise to say, all right, let's come up with some blue sky ideas that's totally unfeasible, because only if you go all the way there, then you can work it backwards to make it practical. And for non-creative people, that is their challenge. They couldn't come up with crazy ideas. So in that way, everything's become feasible, everything is practical. That means nothing is innovative. So that's problem from two ends of the spectrum. But I think for true creatives, sometimes the biggest disappointment doesn't come from the non-feasible idea, but from actually convincing other people, like in Sarah's case, convincing a business stakeholder that, hey, there's something we can do, something we can break the rules or bend the rules a little bit to make it work. Or whether, convince them to go on a journey to continuously to discover with you. I think that is the hardest part. So have a strong heart, keep building up your muscle.
And work with the like minds.
Yeah.
I think working with the like minds is very important.
And I think you just touched on the last question. Yeah. Like-minded people is the
right
people to partner
so
with.
I was going to say that was a question that we can go to, but time has flown. We are like 4 minutes away from the end. I just want to also bring up Ian from the audience, who just put up a really good comment that encapsulates a lot of things that you're saying, which is knowing what doesn't work is just as important as knowing what works, right? So super important. Okay, I have one final question, which is not the one in the Q&A box, but I do want to anchor it back into like our context. Obviously, as I mentioned at the top of the session today, we are convening this series to shed light on the 21st century skills, right? Because this is, to this point, unfortunately, not something that has been, has had a lot of the spotlight within the education system, which is on the soft skills, which is on, the things that are non-academic. So now that we have 3 of the top creatives in Hong Kong in the room, I have to ask, because I need to steal some secrets and I need to, get some inspiration and ideas. What is the best way that you think? What is the best way to train and develop creativity in your minds? And Michael, I'm going to start with you.
All right, I keep it short this time. I think you should train yourself to remember to always ask why before you jump right to the what and how. How probably come around, but before you jump to the what, go back to the why. And it should become a habit, because if you do that, you will notice opportunities all around you.
It's all about the intention for you, Michael. Love it. Sarah, what about you?
I'm an architect, so I will ask you to walk around the city without the Google map. I think that's super important. Yeah, I love the way that we actually, I think Michael talked about the intention and the why. and I want to bring in the words observation. Yeah, because observation really comes from daily life. It's not about any course, any programs, any master degrees. Yeah, they give you some technical substance, but I think this daily observation helps us to keep our curiosity so that we want to be creative.
Well, for Sarah, it is all about the curiosity and the observation. Nice. Jing, take us home.
Very similar, very similar. So I try to say it differently then. When you like something, interrogate it. Know why you like it. Don't just like it. When you hate something, interrogate yourself. I mean, well, it's actually the same. Well, yeah, you know why you hate it. You question. It's similar to what Michael was saying, asking the whys, but I would use the word interrogate. I mean, you need to know why you like something and why you hate something as a daily habit. Once you get used to this habit, you will become more creative because you understand why certain things work and why certain things do not work. So yeah, interrogate.
Wow. We are just running out of time. And I think this is it has been super interesting. I've learned a lot, obviously. But I love that, maybe someone would assume that you all would suggest that writing a song or designing a building or working on a creative project is the best way to train creativity. But all of you are gathering around this idea of just like asking the right questions and observing and think about the intentions. And I think that is super interesting. And I think that is a wonderful note to end on. So thank you to Jing, Sarah, and Michael for spending the past hour and a little bit just hanging out and talking about creativity. This is the first time that we've actually overrun. So I apologize for going 1 minute over. I just enjoyed this conversation too much. I do have to end on a little shout out for our next session, which is to be, is playing the outro music now. So we have to know a little bit about our next session, which is going to be on December 12th, 2 weeks. It's on collaboration. We have two wonderful guests, Cynthia Nunez, who is the director of the Mills Fabrica, and Tracy Chan, who is the executive director of Ednovators. And we'll be chatting a lot about cross-industry collaboration and social impact, and all sorts of things. And we'll probably be touching on communication and creativity and all sorts of other 21st century skills as well. All right. Christina for putting in the sign up. That I'll copy that to everyone. So on that note, thank you again, James. This was interesting. We're going to have a full page of quotes that are going to come out. And it's going to be awesome because we all get to relive your words of wisdom. So thank you again, and we will see you next time.
Yeah, thank you. Good
Thanks
to
for
see you
having
all.
us, Vince. And